And let me invite Mrs. Biwa Mangawiro to talk about the roles of women in the promotion of good governance.
Allow me to stand on existing protocols. Allow me to stand on existing protocols as I look at the role of women in the promotion of good governance in Africa. And just to start this is the need to understand that while good governance, there are various definitions that have been given to what good governance means, but it is about ensuring that policies and public institutions in a country respond to the needs of citizens. These broadly cover political and voice dimensions at citizen level, how collective decisions are made, and how citizens express their preferences. It is also about public sector institution dimensions, integrity and accountabilities of the executive branch of government, and it also about legal and anti-corruption dimensions as well, guarantee of human rights and individual liberties, and protection against misuse of power for private gain. And so in the absence, where there is an absence of good governance or where we have poor systems of governance, these often result in widespread discrimination related to sex, race, color, religion, and political opinion, and many other forms of discrimination that I may not have included here. And looking across the world and also looking into our own continent in Africa, there's a persistence of pervasive gender disparities that continue to exist. For instance, women and men do not have equal levels of political representation. Economically, employment and career structures in the public and private sectors tend to favor men above women, and also service delivery systems are discriminating, and services are often more accessible to men than to women. And the net effect of that is that women suffer many types of discrimination, including legal, political, economic, and socio-cultural forms of prejudice. This also leaves them particularly vulnerable to corruption. And corruption is detrimental to gender equality and is a barrier to women's gaining full access to their civic, social, and economic rights. Although the link between corruption and women is not yet fully understood due to limited research in this area, women are at greater risk of extortion in public service delivery. And secondly, the corruption women experience can also have a sexually abusive nature. And corruption, whether financial or sexual, has far-reaching consequences. There's far-reaching consequences for gender equality, sustainable development, and democratic governance, and the realization of the full commitments such as Agenda 2063, which becomes very critical that corruption is challenged, and women have an important role to play in fighting corruption. Greater participation of women in public life can help in the design of gendered approaches to anti-corruption, which can also prevent corruption experienced by women. This also allows for women to resist corruption, report it, and seek redress where it occurs. Also, increasing gender inclusion in political and economic spheres can also break up the male-dominated collusive networks, resulting in strengthened democratic institutions that are known to reduce corruption. So in this regard, as parliamentarians, you can advocate for gender mainstreaming into anti-corruption policies, strategies, and frameworks, including the implementation of gender-sensitive reporting and redress mechanisms. You also have the opportunity to advocate for collection, analysis, and dissemination of gender disaggregated data on public service delivery and corruption, including on sexual abuse, also referred to as sextortion. You can also recognize and address sextortion as a form of corruption and ensure the justice system can receive, investigate, and prosecute complaints effectively. You also have the opportunity to promote access to information so citizens, and particularly women, are more aware of their rights, what services services they should expect, and how to report corruption. Support the participation of women in public and political life, making available financing for women's electoral campaigns, implementing gender-sensitive policies and procedures in parliament, and adopting a zero harassment policy and corresponding grievances and redress mechanisms for women in public life, because we know that while we advocate for women's empowerment and women's participation in decision-making spaces, women in these spaces are also still prone to facing various forms of abuse that also tend to hinder their ability to fully execute their functions. Women are powerful change of agents, often encouraging others to take action to assert their rights, strengthen their communities, and protect the environment. They have led in the development, advancement, and protection of fundamental human rights from time immemorial, from calling for women's suffrage, equal rights and opportunities in public and private life, resistance to injustice. I mean, in South Africa, every August we celebrate Women's Day, which is a commemoration of South African women's 1956 march against the pass law, which is a demonstration of women advancing women's rights, women fighting for good governance and democracy. And also women have been in the forefront of calling for the inclusion in decision-making processes, such as in peace building and conflict resolution processes, which have culminated in critical international instruments, such as the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, in supporting resolutions. And more recently, we've seen movements such as the hashtag #MeToo, which expose the gross sexual and gender-based violations that women and young girls continue to experience across the continent and across the globe. In political and decision-making spaces, women contribute to redefining political priorities, placing priorities on the political agenda, which reflect and address women's gender-specific concerns, values, and experiences, as evidenced even by their increasing calls for a gendered lens in understanding and addressing the impact of climate change. We know that often in such spaces, women are excluded, yet they bear the brunt of the effects. And if we are looking also at phenomena such as climate change and calling for climate justice, women have been on the forefront of calling for a gendered lens, of calling for inclusivity, which is still pushing the boundaries for good governance. However, in spite of the crucial role that women play in promoting and protecting their rights and advancing democracy, their participation in public and private decision-making spaces, it's still lagging behind. Yes, we have made some strides, and yes, we have countries such as Rwanda who are leading by example globally, but still we are not yet there. Women still remain lagging behind. And in spite of the many international and regional instruments on advancing women's rights, implementation still remains very poor. I mean, my predecessor did allude to some of the instruments that we have on the continent, but we still have implementation poor, or we still have countries here that have not yet ratified the Maputo Protocol, yet it's a very fundamental instrument that is very context-specific to our realities as African women and pushes the boundary even further than some of the international instruments that we have on advocating for women's rights. Sexual and gender-based violence remains rampant on the continent, with an estimated 1 in 3 women having been a victim of GBV. Female genital mutilation remains high, with an estimated 55 million girls having experienced or at risk of the practice here on our continent. And child marriages and teenage pregnancies also remain very high on the continent. Yesterday we had the president here speaking about the challenges of child marriages and teen pregnancies in our communities. So as parliamentarians, it is critical that you enact regional and national laws that promote, protect, and advance women's rights. I mean, there's an opportunity to call for member states that have not ratified the Maputo Protocol to do so, and there's also the opportunity to enact regional instruments such as the anti-FGM bill in the EAC region. Also, effective implementation of laws and policies promoting and protecting women's rights through the creation of instruments that are well-resourced. Often we hear of how our leaders speak about the existence of laws and policies, but these are often not well-resourced. These are often not well budgeted for. And for us to be able to ensure that women are effectively included and participating in democracy spaces, we need to have institutions, we need to have laws and policies that are well-resourced and that are well budgeted for. And also it is critical to hold the executive accountable to uphold and protect women's rights and citizens' rights in terms of our different various constitutions and legislations. And it is also important to monitor effective implementation of laws and policies by organs that are mandated to do so, as well as promote state collaboration with other stakeholders such as civil society and business sectors in advancing women's rights. Also, gender-responsive institutions are essential in promoting and protecting women's rights and promoting democracy. This is particularly essential in post-conflict situations where the legacy of conflict remains long after the peace negotiations have been made. It is critical that judicial reform and democratic processes take into cognizance women's experiences and needs such as ensuring that abuses to women's rights are criminalized and more equitable laws and policies are put in place for the advancement of the well-being of all citizens. In this regard, it is crucial that laws and policies that promote equal access to political, social, and economic opportunities are enacted, effectively implemented, and monitored. It is also important to promote women's participation in decision-making, including supporting financing of women's electoral campaigns, because we know that it's very expensive to contest in political and in election processes, and often lack of funds serve as a hindrance to women's ability to run for public office. Yet, as has been demonstrated, women play a very crucial role in the realization of democracy and good governance on our continent. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا Mrs. Biwa for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'll start by responding to the question that was asked in terms of what is the rule of law and what is the link with democracy. And just to say that, simply put, the rule of law is that no one is above, means that no person is above the law. It means that everyone is subject and accountable to the laws of the land, which are publicly promulgated and are equally applicable, and also such laws should align to internationally accepted standards. And when you link that with democracy, because when we're talking about a democratic state, we're talking about a place where citizens are able to freely choose their leaders, and also where their leaders are also recognized and respect the laws of the land. So that becomes a link there, and are also leaders who are also responsible for ensuring that citizens also recognize and respect the law. So that is how I would simply draw that link to say that the rule of law and democracy work together or work hand in hand. And then to just say thank you very much, honorable parliamentarians, for sharing your experiences or the experiences from your countries, and also for continuing to reinforce the importance of advocating and advancing women's rights, and also for recognizing the role, the important role that women play in good governance, in democracy, and in also being able to attain and create environments where we can realize the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and also realize the Sustainable Development Goals. And certainly enabling environments need to be created for women to be able to effectively and meaningfully participate, because when we talk about women taking positions of power, women being decision makers, we are not talking about about tokenism. We are talking about creating enabling environments for women to be able to effectively and fully play that significant role and be able to fully contribute into the decision-making spaces and shape the priorities for our countries and to be able to address some of the challenges that we are facing during this era. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.